Fine, that's it. Greetings and salutations. You are now sitting live and always in archive at your leisure and convenience with the Divine Prince, Pan-African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye Hoodoo Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing if you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine affirmation, reverberation, reiteration, and it is indeed my ever-living reality, life path and journey, and it is how I, Divine Prince, make sense out of all that we and understanding. The place from where I begin, the place from where I realize and crystallize all my endeavors, understanding that I and I alone create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create. And to each and every one of you, I did have a little bit of problem with the chat going into the show while my Blog Talk Radio music was playing. I'm really not sure what's going on right now. Kiona, my sister Wapani, is also a moderator, and she's not showing up. No one is showing up right now in the group except you. So I don't know what's going on. I might need to reset my participants and my monitoring settings. Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody in the chat right now. And I know that there were several other people who should be visible, including my sister Wapani, who is also a moderator. So please, missionary, Hoodoo, New Orleans, Voodoo Secrets and Recipes of Light to pass, allowing it to reflect off the moon and show up for what we see as our waxing crescent for December 27, 2019. We also have to consider the eclipse that took place in the last 24 hours in the Asiatic world that ultimately affects everything global. So I welcome you. Give me a moment just to figure out what's going on in the live chat. Everything should be back to normal momentarily. I can't explain to you why it's doing what it's doing right now. It's almost allowing secrets and recipes. I want to acknowledge Kwanzaa, Habaragani. The traditional greeting for Kwanzaa is Habaragani, which means what's the news? And you quote or recite the news of the day, which is Kuji Chagalia, self-determination. And indeed, Kuchagalia is one of my favorite, if I had to choose one, my favorite principle. It indeed not only gives us the space and the freedom and the liberty to name ourselves, but to also choose our religion, choose our culture, choose our lifestyle, to be or not to be, as Stevie Wonder said in one of his songs, to be in it, but not of it. And being sure that you're not helping to contribute to this place sometimes called hell. I think that's a direct quote from an old Stevie Wonder song from the 70s. So we're going to talk about self-determination. And as, just as yesterday, not in a traditional sort of Kwanzaa way, but in one that we do hear and the resonance that is Voodoo. We often talk about greetings, Blog Talk Radio. I see you. Please don't think I'm ignoring you. If you're in the chat, please type your questions in all capitals so that I can see them in Blog Talk Radio. And you can also dial 845-277-9143, as someone else has already done, area code 973. I'm going to be with you momentarily. Please just give me a moment. And of course, in Blog Talk, I'm in of self-determination. I want to talk a little bit more detail. Well, first, I want to talk about something I saw on Amazon this morning that sort of motivated me. I like a lot of documentaries, news-oriented, educationally oriented programming. So I watch a lot of documentaries. And I've been in a lot of documentaries, and I'm continuing to create more documentaries to come in 2020. So please look for that. I'm grateful for the Travel Channel. I'm grateful for the History Channel. I'm grateful for Nat Geo. I'm grateful for all the opportunities to bring authentic culture and tradition, particularly as it relates to voodoo, obeah, root work, conjure, in a way that is accessible to the masses, to the community. So I was watching earlier today a documentary called White Savior, Racism in the American Church. And despite the progress many see in the U.S. over the years, it's become increasingly clear that the deep roots of racism and white supremacy continue to run through our political, cultural, and religious institutions. White Savior explores the historic relationship between racism and American Christianity, the ongoing separation of the church in the U.S., and the complexities of racial reconciliation. I would add that not only American Christianity, but American spirituality, and often the way that people who reside in the West, who participate in the West, how we affect what American or Western spirituality is. When we look at the numbers of people who are Black people in particular who are leaving the church, we know there are white people leaving the church as well, but particular Black people in context with Voodoo who are leaving the church and are now utilizing things like Ancestry.com and 23andMe to get a better understanding of who they are, who we are. And Kuji Chagalia is about self-determination. We saw a period in the 70s that still exists today of sort of the recreation of names. And mothers began to name their children anything really that they wanted to. They made up names, they mimicked names, they Africanized names in the absence of really having a real connection to or source of information about lineage, about heritage, about who they are and where they're from. So today we have this DNA tool, Ancestry.com, 23andMe. I should be getting a check from both of you companies. And many other companies, African Ancestry, that I've promoted on the site, on blog, on live, on YouTube, as a tool for not just getting better acquainted with who you are, self-determination, but also then how do you step into a more indigenous practice, a more indigenous world tradition that's in line with your genetics, that's in line with your DNA history, with your ancestral history that is embedded in your blood, that's embedded in your DNA structure. So the idea of self-determination takes on a whole nother level of importance for me. And I came in contact with, I'm still not seeing anyone else in the chat right now. I don't know what's going on. Something weird is going on in the chat, y'all. So if you're watching and you're still with me in YouTube, don't leave just because you can't chat and comment. You can always call me at Blog Talk Radio until I can figure out what's going on with the live chat. And you can call me at 845-277-9143. In fact, area code 973. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic. Divine, all blessed greetings and salutations. Are you with me, beloved?
Yes, hi, happy Friday. This is my first time calling in.
Yes, who's calling?
My name is Tina. Do you do readings? Do we have questions?
I do. I will answer questions. Understand you're live not only on radio, but you're also live right now on YouTube, even though we can't see you. And so I want to say greetings and salutations. I try not to address really personal stuff live on the air, so I can address your questions if they are sort of general. If they also have a relevance or an importance to other people who are also hearing your reading right now live on air, and if you're in agreement with that, you can start asking your questions. Otherwise, would
Yes,
still,
I think to answer that in relation to my boyfriend Sean.
yeah, you're asking for a personal reading live on air, beloved. And so I would appreciate you sending me an email to DivinePrince at houseofthedivineprince.com, and I'll be more than happy to assist you with that. I don't do personal stuff on air. Thank you. I appreciate your calling. So self-determination is deeper than just how we name ourselves, how we define ourselves. It's really about a way of life, about us stepping into and living up to many of the monikers and names and ideas that we profess, that we proclaim, from any position, from any religious position. From in watching this documentary, I came in contact with this word, intersectionality. And intersectionality, intersectionality, is a theoretical framework for understanding how aspects of one's social and political identities like gender, race, class, sexuality, disability might combine to create unique modes of discrimination against first white women, but then this idea was addressed by Black women who first, and this is explained in a great detail in this documentary, White Savior, Racism in the American Church. And the idea that feminism was a construct for and for the support of and the benefit of white women, and did not include the ideas, the conditions that Black women faced in society, particularly as it relates to oppression, racism. And so these words like intersectionality took on new forms as Black activists addressed them. So another word is triple oppression. And triple oppression really predates the word usage, intersectionality. Triple oppression is a theory developed by Black socialists in the United States, such as Claudia Jones. And the theory states that a connection exists between various types of oppression, specifically classism, racism, and sexism. It hypothesizes that all three types of oppression need to be overcome at once. It also referred to as double jeopardy, or Jim Crow, or triple exploitation. So the idea, the notion that we deal with oppression, white supremacy, systematic economic conditions that have its root in antebellum slavery and the old world that we like to think of as being something so far remote in our past. But the truth is that our country and many people and families and systems within our country gained a great deal of monetary wealth that in modern numbers will be calculated in unimaginable amounts. I don't know if it's trillions. I don't know if it's even a larger number than that in terms of the value of our free labor, the value of our forced labor. And so this shows up as it relates to how we self-identify, how we look at ourselves and identify ourselves in this environment and we exist, particularly when we consider what voodoo and Ifa and many of these other West African based systems are. Because understand, they don't view colonialism, they don't often view slavery through the same prism that we do. It does not mean that our brothers and sisters don't self identify, don't self educate, don't travel to the West and to great universities and gain access and information about our joint history, our joint heritage. But it is taught differently and it is often propagandized in a different kind of way in the West African nations than what it is here. And so there's this reinforcement of an idea about who we are and who they are and what being African is that predates our desire to operate in Kuji Chagalia today, in this present moment in time space, when we consider all the other things that we are. We're more than just one thing. We're more than just one idea. We're more than just a reflection of our mother or a reflection of our father, but we're also a reflection of our brothers and our sisters, our siblings, our kin, our community, our neighborhood, our co-worker, co-workers or our working environment, if you will. So that then led me to look at a document called the Investigating a Tabby Slave Cabin. And this is something that I've made reference to over the years. You've heard me talk about scientists finding this, archaeologists finding these white rocks and these white objects in slave compounds or in the hearths or under the flooring of where we would have lived and where we would have had our activity, in the idea that they're trying to piece together the evidence that our self-identity, that our Kuji Chagalia was not somehow just disrupted, interrupted, broken up during the process of enslavement, creating this environment that we still reference today of not knowing our names, not knowing our gods, not knowing our languages, somehow being born anew in America. And there are Black people who today say, you know, I'm not African, I have nothing to do with Africa. You know, all I know is here. All I know is, you know, what my grandmamas knew and what my grandmama and them knew, you know, etc. So the idea of Kuji Charlie and self-determination, with all that we know today, with our internet access, with our ability to use Skype and WhatsApp and other applications to communicate with our people as well as the people of the world, we now have a completely different platform in which to continue to build Kuji Chagalia from. And so I want to share just a little bit, not a whole lot. I'm not going to turn this into a paid lesson or a classroom, though it is a classroom. And I invite your questions and comments on both my Blog Talk Radio as well as my YouTube Live. The Blog Talk Radio number is area code 845-277-9143, 845-277-9143. I welcome your questions, comments, and requests. Let's just remember we live on air. Okay. So if I can't do your health, your love and relationships, your personal business live on air, if you expect me to be truthful, if you expect me to really stop, go into spirit, tap your energy and bring that information forward, I am welcoming questions that we all can learn from, we all can gain from, we all can get some fruit from, and then move forward So I welcome your questions in the chat in all capital letters. Thank you so much, Kiana, for your assistance. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the chat right now. So all my chat settings are off. So give me a moment or some time to get them together. Please do type your questions and comments that you wish me to respond to or to read out loud in all capital letters so that I can separate it from the rest of the general love and support that goes on in the chat. Greetings, Jennifer Anderson, um, naturally Tyra, um, anyone who I haven't named directly, Kimberly, Aubley. I'm certainly honored by you all being present. Type your questions and comments in all capital letters. I'll be more than happy to respond. So let me share a little bit of this truth in order for you to understand where I'm at right now, and maybe where you are too right now in terms of self-identity. Kujichagulia, self-determination. More than just renaming yourself, but truly determining your journey, your path, your next step, your obligation, your commitments in the world. In order to understand the history of the United States of America, it's important to understand the period of time when slavery existed. Slavery was filled with incidents of brutality, punctuated here and there by moments where individuals reached across the barriers of race, gender, and class to be decent to each other. Kingsley Plantation offers the opportunity to encounter this double-faced reality in the complex lives of Anta Majigan Ndiaye, who was renamed Anna Kinsley, and Zephaniah Kinsley. Now, listen, this is an important story. Many of you have never heard this before. Don't be put off by, uh, uh, individuals reaching across barriers of race, gender, and class. I assure you, many of you have never, ever, 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 ever heard this story before. So, in terms of losing our names, losing our identities, being stripped of our gods, being stripped of our ancestors, we have a unique case. If you want to look it up, investigate. This is the title: Investigating a Tabby, Tabby, slave cabin. And it's written up, drawn up, created for educators to then share this information as teachers in various learning formats. So during Florida's colonial plantation period, 1763 to 1865, Fort George Island was owned by many planters. You might say slave owners. The site name comes from one of the owners, Zephaniah Kinsley. In 1814, Kinsley moved to Fort George Island with his wife and 3 children. A 4th child would be born on this plantation. His wife, Anta Majigan, I'm not sure how she got this name, but his wife, Anta Majigan Ndiaye, was from Senegal, Africa, and was purchased by Kinsley as a slave in 1806. She actively participated in plantation management, acquiring her own land and slaves when she was freed by Kinsley in 1811. This account reveals an often hidden fact that some slave owners married their slaves and that former slaves in America went on to own other slaves. Another important piece to this story, which is why I'm bringing it forward to you now, is also the idea that the Kinsleys sort of allowed for an African presence, a Native American presence, to be represented within their slave camp, within their slave family. Part of the importance of their story if I were to skip ahead to this story, is the archaeological documentation about this Kingsley plantation. Many of the slaves that lived during Zephaniah Kingsley's era, 1814 to 1839, were African born or the children of Africans. A list of Kingsley's slaves prior to his arrival on Fort George Island provides examples of their nationality or language groups. And they include the Igbo, the Calaban, Rio Pongo, the Sosho or the Shoshu, and the Zingwibor. Kingsley allowed his Africans to keep their tribal names instead of forcing anglicized names upon them. African names, anglicized means Christian. African names that these descendants of this plantation had were Kwamila, Bichi, Mbadni, Tita, Aibo, Cabo, Shuma, Motoro, Tamafia, and Nobia. And Kingsley also allowed children born on his plantations to be given African names, such as the boy named Baju and another boy named Mtoto, the Swahili word for children. Zephaniah and Anna Kingsley are most remembered here, but much of the history of the Kingsley plantation was made by the hundreds of enslaved Africans and their descendants who did much of the working, living, and dying here. Beyond a rare list of names, these men, women, and children are virtually absent from the historic records. This erasure from history is true for enslaved men and women throughout the Americas. Without written records, this lost history can only be brought back to life through archaeology. The birthplace of African American archaeology can be traced to the Kingsley plantation. The birthplace of African American archaeology is traced to this plantation, the Kingsley plantation, where in 1968, archaeologists first began to search for artifacts that reflected African identity. This identity is most easily seen within the realm of spirituality or religion, which is resistant to change. However, the physical remains of such practices are extremely subtle. This also is a response to some degree to Adrian's question on yesterday about why do we feed material things to some material representation of a power or a force or a spirit. And then what are the sort of levels of importance to that? And so without finding these things, this evidence of these feedings, these offerings, this ritualized practice, a great deal of our history and our connection to who we were before enslavement would be lost. And so that's why this story is so important to not just voodoo, hoodoo, root work, conjure, and clarifying the authentic footprint of these traditions. But before commercialism, before the Botanicas, before 800 numbers, before anyone could sign up to be a tarot reader, before anyone could sign on to be a self-proclaimed psychic, we have a footprint of history, an archaeological footprint of our practice, of our African identity now being documented at the archaeological, at the academic level. This identity is most easily seen within the realms of spirituality and religion, which is resistant to change. However, the physical remains of such practices are extremely subtle. The most spectacular find relating to African spirituality was the remains of a chicken found under the floor of a slave cabin. The chicken was buried with an unbroken egg, a glass bead, and a piece of iron. Animal sacrifice is still practiced by some cultures in Africa to mark the births and deaths, and as sacrifice to specific deities. The chicken may have been sacrificed to appease earth spirits disturbed during the initial construction of the cabin. The particular deer leg buried in the doorway of an adjacent cabin may be of a similar offering, according to this document. In addition to animal remains, the Igbo have a strong tradition of placing iron house charms in doorways to prevent any harm from entering the house. This is a root connection to why we mount iron horseshoes till this day over our house, and often associate not just Eshu, Elegba. Eshu is kept outdoors, by the way. Elegba or Legba in the corner behind the front door, but why there has still been a footprint of association between Legba and Ogu. Even now in the Americas, the symbol of iron, and that too being somewhere located in the vicinity, if not mounted, directly over the door. In 2006, an agricultural hoe was found buried in the back doorway of a cabin. A similar placement of another hoe, an axe blade, and other iron objects were found scattered near the back door of a cabin in 1968. Archaeologists believe the placement of these objects were intentional. As one researcher stated, many houses are protected by charms, which are found hanging above the doorway or buried in the floor of the house or outside the building. This was noted by Awo Lalu in 1979. The placement of an iron object buried in or near the doorway of a house could be highly significant. There is a belief in many African cultures that beads have supernatural powers and can be worn to provide protection from harm. Archaeologists recovered several blue beads from 2 slave cabins. The beads varied in shape and size, suggesting that they were selected specifically for their color. Evidence from other antebellum plantations suggests that the color blue had spiritual or religious significance. So this is one of many documents that I've referred to over the years of doing this broadcast in terms of archaeological finds and discoveries of evidence that we didn't put down our God, put down our research. In my words, I coined these words. We didn't forget how to count just because we were now forced to make this middle passage into the new world. We indeed could remember to count, therefore we could remember to drum, therefore we could remember the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the sun, and our ritual connection to nature as it related to our holding on to our gods and our deities. Greetings to everyone in my live chat. Please do enter your questions, comments, and requests in all capital letters so that I can see them and distinguish them from the rest of the activity that might be going on. In the chat, I still got people missing, and I don't understand that. I still don't see my sister, who we just discussed her being here like right before we came on air. And I can't see her in chat. But I welcome each and every one of you who are present. Thank you so much, Kiana, for your assistance. I don't want to reboot or refresh the show if the video and the audio is playing clearly. So I'll just worry about the chat later. The chat is not operating properly in Blog Talk Radio either. It keeps refreshing itself and asking me to reload. So if you have a question, comment, or request, You can type it in YouTube Live in all capital letters, and I should be able to see it, except for the people who are somehow not showing up. And of course, you can call me at 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. We're talking about determination. We're talking about more Sakia, Beatrice James, Leah Martin, Jennifer Anderson, Naturally, Tyra, Kiona Living Magic, him downstairs, T. Warner, Kimberly Obley, whoever else I may not be seeing right now in the chat. We're talking more than just naming ourselves. We're talking more than just deciding we're not going to practice the religion of our parents, or of society, or of your particular culture or region of the world. Understanding that this show is international. There are people who live in cultures right now who don't have a choice of their religion, who don't have a choice of choosing a name that might suggest another religion, another belief system, another way of life. We approach Kuji Chagalia and self-determination and suffer in such a very shallow, limited way in the West. Only about me, myself, and I. Only about my coins, my liras, my dollars, my acquisitions, my material things. And self-determination is more about purpose, which is a day later in the week, Nia, but it's really more about purpose. I said from day one, we can't address umoja, unity, without compartmentalizing all these symbols into how we approach what unification is in self and then at the community level. Self-determination, same thing. We can either only look at ourselves through our own prism, with our own understanding, to meet our own needs, to meet our own wants, but we can also be gods and goddesses that also seek to lay down a foundation that people behind us can stand upon, that people behind us can emulate in authenticity and continue to grow. Let our name changing and our renaming of ourselves be authentic and be based in something of truth, and be based in something that we can point to, in our DNA, in our families, in our lineage, that creates a continuum of information, a continuum of practice. I've, over the years, also, greetings, Wapani. I'm glad you're back. I don't know if you stayed gone because you couldn't get in or what that was. Thank you so much for being present. Kiona, thank you so much for being present. If you all don't know, one Wapani is my blood sister. We share a mother and a father. She's a well-renowned author. She's written, I believe, 3 books and might be actively working on her next 3 books. She avid crocheter like I once used to do, creates all sorts of things. Like my beloved Naja creates all sorts of things. Everybody in my house creates and makes things, produces things, is self-employable. So I appreciate both of you assisting me in terms of monitoring and helping me to sort of maintain some control in terms of what's happening in the group. I reset all the settings in YouTube Live, so everything should be back to normal. You should be able to refresh your page and things should be back to normal. I cannot, okay, Rapani, I cannot refresh my page, otherwise I would have to reboot the show and do a point 2. So I'm glad that the chat is back to normal. We're talking about Kuji Chagalia. I appreciate your questions, comments, requests. Type them in all capital letters in the live YouTube chat so that I can see them and respond to them. Chat is not working quite right in my in my Blog Talk Radio, I can refresh my Blog Talk Radio studio, and I might be able to fix that without ending my Blog Talk Radio show. The abrupt end yesterday was not by any means anything that I did. It was a technological thing. I'm not sure if it was on my end or in my browser or in Blog Talk Radio itself. But my Blog Talk Radio chat is now active. You can type your questions, comments, requests in all capital letters. And of course, you can dial 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. How we name ourselves, who names us, how we step in that, how we walk in that is indeed important. It is absolutely important. But how we name ourselves, even if you don't change the name your mom and dad gave you, but you have a nickname or you have a moniker or you now have identified by and with in the virtual realm, that is the internet. Understanding that there's an energy exchange that's happening there too. Somehow we feel that we're a great deal anonymous, and walking in this sort of secrecy, when we're on the internet, and that's fine. Even if I don't know your government name, even if I don't know the name that's on that image that we emit with our name now in this new space, we like to think of it as a playground. Think of it more like a lab of some sort, a science from the botanical. We see it as an extension of who we are. We see that as an extension of our voice, which we want people to see. Only that which we think we are in command of. Jerry Springer, viewer, once upon a time back. One of the things that for the camera, not our worst, then and and not get some kind of togetherness within myself before presenting my crossroad destiny when you feel you have no one looking over your shoulder. And an idea that I used to play as a kid, I know many of you do too as well, through a pony. I'm not sure what's going on with that buffering. Almost trying to refresh the page. Now it does subside, Kiona. And if it doesn't, I'm going to have to refresh. It's not that have looked out for me that I'm truly grateful for. They're sort of from the UK and from London. So thank you so much, Beatrice, for being here. Thank you, everyone, of such diversity as is this audience, but also is Voodoo. Understand that the African footprint is worldwide. Not just the Middle Passage, not just slavery, but all that has happened post-slavery, post-colonization, and the movement in the world, the advancements in the world, both those out of oppression, but also those of just a need, a desire to want another life, to live a different way, to live free of oppression and free of economic challenges, and to have just an opportunity somewhere to self-define, to self-create, to recreate yourself in your image. We're not talking about becoming fake. We're not talking about pretending to be something that you're not. We're talking about truly getting in contact with yourself. And just like, the most perfected, faceted quartz, getting in touch with every aspect of yourself. We have more than one person inside each and every one of us. There's that person that you present when you're doing business. I've been told there's that person that I present when I'm on air and when I'm doing this show. There's that person that you present when you're in your work environment. There's that person you present maybe when you're in that retail environment and you're shopping, and you're purchasing things. So we are indeed multifaceted. We are indeed multidimensional. And sometimes we only focus on our strengths or our weaknesses or some unique combination of the two to the exclusion of all the other facets of who and what we are. Um, I didn't remember that my sister, one Wapani, had even taught me how to crochet until well into my late 20s, even in my 30s. And I started doing it for survival. So as a vendor, not only was I doing body oils and fragrances and selling oil burning products and incense and dipping sticks of incense, but I started crocheting, in particularly pouches for quartz crystal like this, because it's always going to have a unique shape, a unique size. Some of the bags that you buy at the store, for $1, $2, or $3 or whatever, are often cheaply made and don't hold up well or don't fit the unique size and facets of some of these stones. And some of these stones can cut through your yarn over time, can cut through a cheap dollar bag over time through use, through friction, and because of the natural facets of the stone itself. So I found that I had a need to crochet. And so I then remembered that Wapani had taught me how to do so. Like in elementary school, I think Wapani had started crocheting, and then that sort of light bulb went off. And now she's doing it and has taken it to a whole nother level. She's got baby clothes and all kind of stuff that I just don't even have the time to do. And she does it so well. So check out my sister Wapani. She'll hook up with you in a way that she favors. So just send her a message or shoot her a comment, and she'll get with you if she needs and if you need. Greetings, all. Andre Polk. We certainly thank you for joining us. Kiona is asking a question: is it a blockage to all of a sudden not desire a romantic relationship, but only desire oneself and spirits only? Uh, I would say that depends on how it shows up and your relationship to it. Um, Relationship have been a problem for me all my life. I would say from birth. So a therapist is going to start with, your family and your relationship to your mom and your dad and your siblings and the conditions that you then grow up under. But then there's that social climate, and we step out into the world and we learn about humanity. We learn about people. We learn about what's good about humanity. We learn about what's negative about humanity. And sometimes we can get in a place, forgive me for saying a dark place, and I don't want to disparage darkness. And we give up on humanity or have a negative feeling about humanity or relationships or men or women or other genders, whatever the case might be. And so then there's a shutdown for that reason. And I would say that destiny is often at work. And people come to me for a reading about that, about love and relationships, about blockages. More often than not, destiny shows up in the divination, your ancestors show up in the divination, and then the other activities of humans involved in the relationship, meaning you and the relationship that you've had or the relationship that's on the table when you come to me for a reading, or the girl or the boy who's interfered. Those show up as humans in my readings, in my divination. But then there's what we talked about yesterday, being spiritual versus the person who says, well, I'm spiritual and not religious. I mean, really being spiritual, really living a 360-degree spiritual life from every angle, from every facet. So now we see demonstrations of people. I want to be careful about my word usage right now. Um, Prophets, maybe, high evolving spiritual persons who've sort of been deified historically, Um, the Christ, the Christ, because I see that as a title. I'm not exactly sure who or what that person really is historically. Buddha, Akhenaten, who is said to have created monotheism. Then there's sort of this notion when we look at their story of what I coined the wilderness. People of various religions and traditions now say that today, the wilderness, which is sort of emblematic, symbolic of um, getting away from the mundane, getting away from your normal life, getting away from vibrating at the level everyone else is vibrating from. And so there's this separation that happens. And so sometimes that's conscious. We would say, in the best case scenario, the nun, the monk chooses isolation, separation, celibacy to gain a certain heightened sense. I don't believe celibacy is for everybody. I don't think it's necessarily something that should be a permanent condition for everybody. I think it comes and goes based on where you are in your path, in your journey, but also in your life. You know, are you 16, 18, 21, 25, 35, 45, 55, 75, 85, 95? I think it shifts positions of importance based on where you are in your journey. So sometimes spirit will force it on you. I think that there are those who are called to marry, and there is a word for that in Haitian Voodoo, to marry the Loa, to marry the deity, to have only a relationship with the spirits, and then to serve the spirits. But I don't think it's something that anybody voluntarily steps into. I don't think it's anything that anyone sort of chooses. Like voodoo, it chooses you. You don't choose it. Um, People explore it, people look into it, people tinker with it, people play around with it, and not just voodoo, but with religion, with celibacy. The newest thing is um, sober-mindedness or sober. I can't think of the proper word. I just learned it on TV yesterday. This new thing where you're considering sober life, not necessarily really sober, but you're considering sober life. And now there are all these bars and social activities for people that are sort of in this gray zone that's now been monetized. So the idea of Kiona, uh, it being a blockage, sometimes it does show up as a blockage if you're dating too much, if you're going in and out of relationships without consciousness, if you're not learning the lesson from one encounter to the next, and now you're just on autopilot. Yeah, you might then experience a blockage. You might then experience, you know, God, the goddess, the ancestors saying, look, I need you to focus here and get your house together, or get your science together, get your health together, get your body together before you now consider not only sharing energy, but now extending it. And when I use those words, it's no different than ministry. It's no different than being a nurse. It's no different than being a teacher. It's no different than anyone who sort of budgets their availability, budgets their resources, budgets their energy attachments to people, places, and things. And particularly when it gets in the way of you growing spiritually, you evolving. And so then we can use that word, yeah, showing up as a blockage. Uh, and you know what I'm going to say? I have to do a divination on you in order to clarify, is it a blockage, or is it indeed destiny? Is it indeed your destiny to be single, or to not have children, or to have your children not be biological, but be, you know, the 2,000 children that you teach, the 2,000 children that you initiate, the 2,000 children that you have supported and have built a school for or brought water to. You know, we have this very limited way of looking at value in the Western world. And so the value of fasting, the value of abstinence, the value of celibacy, the value of removing ourselves from any person, place, or thing or energy that's hindering growth, that's hindering progress. Now, when we're just tucked away, when we're just hiding, when we're just running, when we're just trying to escape, when we're just in denial, that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother thing. Sometimes we're in denial of what the real cause, what the real message is, when we sort of view and associate what might be happening at any given point in time in our love life as a block, as opposed to a lesson or something that I'm not getting, something I'm not piecing together. It's not you, it's me, you know, but no, it's not me, it's you. And it may be, you know, God, and it may very well be the ancestors suggesting that your energy, your focus be somewhere else. Even my sister Wawapani would agree. Sometimes you just have to be still. Sometimes you just got to put your phone on mute. Sometimes you just got to put your own mouth and your own thoughts and your own precognitions on mute to be still enough to hear what ancestors are saying, what spirit is saying. And I think that's an important part of self-determination. Um, I could spend a whole 3 hours just talking about my name and how I evolved my name and how I was gifted my name and how my name came to be. And my name is several parts, my full legal government name. It represents more than one ethnic group. It represents more than one part of who I am. Sort of my ministerial name, my stage name, some people might say, my IMDb acting actors union name, DivinePrince, is also an extension of me. Is also a numerical extension of me. It's also an astronomical extension of me. And so how we identify, what name we go by, and what we call ourselves all resonate at a particular frequency that either draws or repels certain other energies to us or for us or with us, depending on that specific thing that we're looking at, that point of light that we're looking at. So in self-determination, let it not be Kwanzaa just. Let it not be Black History Month, February just. Let it not be Essence Fest, Woke Wonderland. Shout out to hashtag Woke Wonderland. Let it not just be what we do at Essence Fest when we put on our kente, which a lot of it is manufactured in China and India, if you ain't understanding where your textile is coming from. Let it not just be special occasions when we sort of stand up and represent who we are and what we believe. We live in a world where Islam is overt, Catholicism is overt, Christianity is overt, evangelical Christianity is overt, atheism is overt. And so why wouldn't voodoo, why wouldn't ATR, a traditional African-based religious system, why wouldn't people who are acknowledging indigenous systems, indigenous ways of viewing God, be vocal? And so being vocal does come through your fourth chakra, but it also resonates from every other chakra in your demonstration. How you live, what you do, how you eat at the first chakra, how you live, what you take in your body, what you consume, what you consider in terms of your nourishment, your relationship to your water, your drinking water, your bathing water, your plant water. You should have a relationship to your water. Your water in itself is liquefied crystal. and can hold a vibration. You should talk over your water. You should pray over your water. You should project an energy into water that you're consuming. When I'm at the water fountain, at the drinking gourd, I'm chanting a mantra. I'm thinking a very specific thing as I'm taking water into my body. And you can feel it. You can feel it move through you. And it's a part of that creation and recreation process, first within self, but then also as it shows up in your manifestations, in your magic, in your spirit practice, in your walk, in your relationship to the universe, and how that is now coming and supporting you and showing up for you. Please help me with Pani. Am I missing anything? Any questions, comments, requests? I welcome everyone to participate, to be a part of the show. I thank Kiona for injecting my email address, DivinePrince at houseofthedivineprince.com, and also my website at http:// or HTTPS, which means it's secure, : www.houseofthedivineprince.com. Did you see that? Did you catch that? I know if you're on YouTube Live, you did. Blog Talk Radio, if you aren't watching me, you're missing part of the show. But I'm grateful for Blog Talk Radio. The chat seems to be working. And please call me at 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. Do press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. That'll raise your hand for me virtually in Blog Talk Radio. It'll let me know that there is a caller in queue. I'll unmute your mic and bring you into the conversation. Even in the celebration of Kwanzaa itself, I've seen not just that I've done over the years, or that which my family has done over the years, or my friends or my circle has done over the years, but just in scanning the internet, the various ways we come at the symbols and things that represent Kwanzaa for us. The mazeo, the corn, the kika, the mat that it is all set upon, which represents the foundation. The corn is the symbol of the harvest, the symbol of children, the symbol of the generations that continue to grow, that continue to be a part of the DNA, because corn has a DNA link, a DNA chain. The mikika is the mat. This is symbolic of our foundation, our history, the tradition upon which we build self-determination from. The kanara, the candle holder, which holds the 7 candles that we light and ignite symbolically each day or each night that you acknowledge your Kwanzaa shrine or your Kwanzaa setup. The muhindi is the corn. This is symbolic of our children and our future, what they embody. So the mazeo, the crops, and the muhindi have a relationship. And you heard me talk in the last 2 or 3 shows about getting your grains together for New Year's Eve. Now, some of you know about, cooking your black-eyed peas and whatnot and having those things on hand. But there indeed is a ritual. It's a gree-gree. It's a satchel that I'm preparing and have been preparing ritually and ceremonially for my house, members of my house, and of course for anybody who asks for it, sends an offering or donation and asks for it. I'll indeed mail that out to you to ensure prosperity, crop growth, the infusion of Arisha Oko moving into 2020. Mishuma Saba, the 7 candles, are symbolic of the Nguzu Saba. The 7 principles, which are signified by the 7 days and the names that we invoke, Habaragani, Nguzu Saba, is the seven principles that we respond to our guiding with, and the matrix and minimum set of values with which African people, trans-African people, pan-African people all across the world are urged to live by. The Kikumba Cha Umoja, the unity cup, is often shared, passed around to signify a ritual act of consuming the libation, taking the life-giving water or the life-giving wine or the life-giving source within, but also an act of unity, an act of us all drinking from the same cup, acknowledging that we sort of come from, we were served sort of the same cup. We didn't choose to be descendants of the Middle Past. We didn't choose to be exactly where we are in this moment in time space, but it's a symbol of us sharing that cup, acknowledging the shared cup, if you will. Zawadi, the gifts, which are often self-created, self-made, self-produced. You try to avoid, commercialism, retail as much as possible. Feeding the monster, that is sort of the official Christmas and holiday season that swirls around us right now and at this time. And of course, the Bendera, which is the flag, the flag representing us as a people, as a nation. So the ideas behind Kwanzaa and the seven principles, to me, are much more important. Not that every other aspect is not important, because they are ritual. They are active, energetic encasements of our energy by setting up the shrine, by positioning things a particular way, by having a particular order of how we address this particular power, this particular moment in time space. So the ritual is absolutely as important as the principles themselves. But it is the principles of unity, self-determination, collective working responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, faith, the Nguzu Saba that we live out actively, hopefully, prayerfully at each and every moment of our waking lives. It's not just something that we do these particular 7 days and then forget. And that's how we view the church. That's how we view, the mosque. You meet on your sacred day, you eat your sacred food, you wear your sacred clothes, you do your sacred ritual. And then we sort of go back out into society on Monday or on Saturday or on Sunday, depending on when your sacred day is, the next day after your sacred day, and go back to living what we call as the world, living as everyone else sort of does. And self-determination sometimes gets lost in that. Self-determination sometimes is not always readily visible in that. Andre Folk, I see your question only because Kiona Living Magic put that big question mark there. So forgive me. And my sister Wanwapani, I'm going to answer you in a moment. Andre Polk asks, how do you all feel about those who say that you don't have to be initiated into any spiritual system to be adept? Now, Andre Polk, I'm glad you're here. And you may know what I'm getting ready to say, but I'm going to explain it for those who are watching and who are listening. Words are important to me. And Wanwapani is my blood sister, by the way, raised by the same set of parents. She knows what I mean when I say words are very important. We are both the children of a retired school teacher, so words were important. And my Asperger's and sort of how my wiring works, I pay very close attention to words. So how do I feel? And others in the group feel about the idea of people saying you don't need to be initiated. You are born with your gifts. You are born with your identity to some degree. Not the identity that your parents put on you, that your village puts on you, that society then puts on you, that your peer group then puts on you, that your university experience, puts on your military experience. I'm talking about you are born with the seeds of your identity at the moment of your creation, at the moment of your inception. So there's that part that is organic, that is controlled by God. And I often justify the horrors of my childhood and my upbringing by saying that had it not been for that and the push for me to be out on the street at such a young age, I would not have had the opportunity or the experiences that I had to bring me to where I am today. So self-initiation, and there are words in traditional African systems that describe not exactly self-initiation, but one who is initiated by the ancestors. And for obvious reasons, I don't spit those words out a lot because people have been, it'll be their profile name tomorrow. So there is an opportunity for all of us to connect individually with God, with spirit, with knowledge, with information. But it is not the same thing. I like how you use the word adept. Being adept is a separate issue from being initiated. Being initiated. And so the question asks, it's embedded in your question. The question would then ask, what are you adept at? And being adept is about being specialized, being expert in a particular thing, a particular skill, a particular manifestation. Whereas when you say initiation, you're giving homage to a system. You're giving a knowledge to that system and the body of information that's contained within that system that is held as sacred enough that initiation is required. I think that particularly when you're offering services of any kind, even a tarot reader, you should be initiated. And so people say, well, what's the system for that? Well, what's the, you know? And so again, you first go back to what is self-initiation? How many, not only books have you written, how many websites have you written, but how many practitioners have you studied with? How many elders who've been in the system 30, 40, 50 years? How many of them have you sat at, heard their experience, learned their secrets? Because the truth is, even as a, and I'm not picking on the tarot reader, but it's the easiest thing for people to sort of pick up, buy a store, and then sort of assume a position in spiritual knowledge without any real demonstration of spiritual knowledge. It's more than just what symbols are being displayed on your card. And notice I didn't show the card. I've talked about that before. You don't play around with the tarot like that. You don't start turning over signs. You're now turning over faith. Yours and those who are around you and those who you read. So it's more than just the turning over the card. Do you really understand the system of tarot, the history of tarot, what tarot is, where it came from? And then, of course, now all these new modern manifestations of tarot cards. And now we call them other things, oracle decks, angel decks, we call them other things now because we can sort of play around with the plasticity of retail and commercialism and copyright and trademarking and branding and etc. Oh no, my deck is not tarot, it's an angel deck. That kind of thing. So Andre Polk, I don't think initiation is avoidable. Even if you trust the stories of a Muhammad, of a Christ, of a Buddha, of these great leaders, at the minimum leaders who stood up as examples of people who evolved consciousness and even in some cases evolved religion. There was a map there in just understanding their lives that involves some sort of wilderness period, isolation, separation, and then training, initiation, receiving something outside themselves, and being willing to go without to receive something outside ourselves. And the going without is implied in initiation, it's implied in wilderness, it's implied in the separation. What do the boys do when they're in the bush, separated from the rest of the village for 3 years or 9 years, depending on the ethnic group and the tribe, the culture? What are they doing? How are they eating? What are they learning? What's being talked about? And if you're not a part of that system, that tradition, you only know what you can read in a book. You only know what has passed through the author of the blog or the podcast that you're reading. So initiation is unavoidable. You're going to have to you're going to have to self-initiate. Number one, there's no way around that. Even if you play to go to Cuba, pay to go to Oshogo, you're going to have to self-initiate. That's number one. Because even if you go and do that, come back, you still don't really know anything. You've only had a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months to learn a whole culture, a whole language, a whole tradition, and then to hear the opinions, at the least, if not the truths at a higher level of what the elders in that lineage, that practice, that tradition have to say. Even paganism, even witchcraft, even some of the systems that I don't necessarily practice and or support. I acknowledge that there's a truth there that should be respected. And so initiation is also about acknowledging that truth, that that power. Being an adept is about expertise. So you can be an adept reader. You can be an adept um, um, herbalist. You can be an adept musician. You could be an adept drummer and ritual drummer at that, because ritual drumming is very different from just drumming, beloved. There's a number there that has to be adhered to. There's a count, an up count, a down count that has to be adhered to if you're doing ritual drumming. So initiation has to happen. Initiation is going to actually happen on you, for you, through you. And then once we reach a certain level of consciousness, we like to believe that we then choose the initiation. There's a conflict among some Christians about the idea of the baptizing, the Catholic baptizing of a baby versus the baptizing of an adult who's consciously chosen this new life, this new way of being. We often see that baptism of babies as sort of a protection. Let's put the protection over the baby even before they have an opportunity to get into any kind of sin, any kind of problem. Ruby D, I greatly appreciate the donations, but I ask that you don't do that. Please don't do that. I can't prove where that money goes. I started doing YouTube Live in January, and many people tried to send donations and offerings in that I've never seen. So I don't quite understand how it works. I would prefer that if people were going to send me an offering or donation, that they would use my PayPal. PayPal, HTTPS, the S means it's secured, colon, forward slash, forward slash, no, yeah, forward slash, www.paypal.me forward slash the Divine Prince. So it's paypal.me forward slash the Divine Prince. Or you can go to my website. There's a PayPal link automatically there for your convenience. And even in the email, it's automatically embedded in my signature. And either Kiona or Wapani might even type it in for me if they feel like it. But I'm honored. They say it's the thought that counts. I'm honored by the gift. I just can't tell you where it's gonna go. I just don't know what happens to that money once it leaves YouTube and it's supposed to go to Google Ads and end up in your PayPal. I've never seen it. And I've had some people who've tested it, who've sent me $5, $10, $20. So you can withdraw it if you will. I would be honored. You can withdraw it. Is there a question here? Yes. I'm interested in learning E5 to use for myself in my house. Occasionally, I might share what I learned with family and friends, but primarily for personal development. What level of initiation would you recommend? Now, I like your question because it's not about me. It's not about whether I initiate you or not. It's about what is the appropriate initiation. And so this is going to be controversial because, there's Cuba, there's Puerto Rico, there's Nigeria, then there's Ghana and other traditions. Now, you use the word Ifa. Ifa is Yoruba specific, Yoruba specific. Now, my godchildren and even my family members, Wapani is my blood sister, we have DNA done. So we know what region of Africa. We have now a list of ethnic groups to figure out who we are from. But I do know we are a little bit Yoruba, but we're that much Igbo, and we're that much Ewe or Ewe, which is often spelled EWE. So my advice is before you commit, before you get the passport, before you put down a whole bunch of money, figure out who you are. So initiation, in my opinion, should first start with your ancestors. Where else would you start? Where else would you begin? In my house, it's going to be your ancestors, Ori, and then the road opener. Now, I'm hearing here in the West, because it's done differently in Africa, you get your hand, and I'm hearing you get one hand. I'm hearing you get two hands. How many hands do you need to be sufficient? And then you're only getting the blessing of Ifa. You're not necessarily being crowned or initiated in the mysteries of the deity Orula or Rumila who govern what Ifa is. And that's the Babalawo. I'm also hearing of people coming right in from first initiation into Akbatabi. Akbatabi means wife of the Babalawo. So some of these charlatan Babalawos are convincing you all to not only come into the tradition, but you're going to be queen. You're going to be wife of the Babalawo right out the gate, right off the jump. And really, you're not marrying the Babalawo. You're marrying the deity, the power that governs the divination, which is the Fa. In Voodoo, it's Fa, Ruby. In Yoruba, it's Ifa. In Akan or Fan or Ewe, it's Fa, F-A. That's it. The difference is that simple, whether it has an I or it doesn't have an I. So when you asked about Ifa, my assumption, my response is you want to learn, study, initiate into Yoruba culture. Yoruba culture. So you're not just taking on a religion or a path just for your home, just for yourself, but you're also doing it for your bloodline. Even if your family is not involved, in response to your question, even if your friends are not directly involved, just like your friends aren't involved in your budget, just like your friends aren't necessarily involved in your going to church or you're going to synagogue or you're going to the mosque. So I understand that aspect of your question. And you may even be implying that you're not seeking to teach or read or be a practitioner. And in all honesty, if you were initiating into E5, you're a long way from that. I know we see people doing it on Instagram, but you're a long way from that. You don't get the hand of E5. You don't fly to Cuba, for 2 weeks or 2 months, and then you come back and tomorrow you're a practitioner. You don't even know the language yet. Not you, Ruby. I'm talking in general to everybody. So I would start with me. I guess in all fairness, with me, ancestors. What is your hand? Where are you in all of this? And then, of course, the road opener. Then from there, you learn, are introduced to, gain access to the deities that govern your head and the deities that you are going to work with. Because you work with more than just that one deity and or spirit um, that governs your head. So my first divination is about your ancestors and your shrine and knowing who they are and making that connection before you get into anything dangerous, anything unknown, anything foreign. You first connect your ancestors and get their protection, get their approval, and then you move into the tradition. Now, if you go to West Africa, it's done very differently than how it's done here in the West. First, if you're born there, you're born into your house. You're born into your tradition. And then so they find your name, which is usually, I think, in the first 30 days of the child being born. Then with that divination is done, and the divination has a very specific name. You sit in a very particular place, and it then shapes your journey, almost like a tree. But that's just the first level of the tree, the first branches, the first sprouts, the first green sprout that's now getting woody bark on it. And then each divination, each ritual, each system that you have, that you participate in after that, is added to that tree. And so that's why in Hispanic culture, Cuban culture in particular, they got a notebook. This stuff is written down. They know who was in the room, who witnessed it, who made what, who touched your head, who was a part of the ceremony. Voodoo is a little bit different. And to some degree, I'm still responding to Andre's question, the beloved's question about initiating. Because without this, you have no operational skill, mobility, or tools within these systems. Now, to stay outside of them and say, well, I'm spiritual, I live a spiritual life, well, that's a very Western notion about what spirit and spirituality is. And so some people say, well, I'm just going to do tarot. It's not attached to a system. I can do astrology. It's not attached to a system. I can do crystal. It's not necessarily attached to a system. And I don't have to deal with your rules, your protocols, your money, your obligations, etc. And of course, because we have divine will, that's your will. That's your choice. I'm not here to stop anyone from being Buddhist, from being Hindu, from being anything that you choose to be. I just teach from the platform that if you want to be in balance with yourself, your ancestors, your DNA, your lineage, that you want to line up from that perspective. And often on your spiritual journey, whatever that is, to becoming an adept, you're going to read many things, study many things, pass through many traditions and practices, even within yourself, even within your own DNA, in order to get, to that place that you want to be. Keon, I hear you saying I refuse to allow them to shave my head. Um, it's all attached, but yet separate. That's a strong point. That was also an issue. Forgive me, Block Talk Radio, for stopping to sip coffee. That was also something that I had to confront. I had made, and see, when you receive the hand of Ifa, they shave your head, and it is often the doorway, the gateway into the tradition, because Arula or Rumila, the spirits that govern divination in Yoruba, have to now be present at, I was doing this tree thing, now have to be present at every throw of the shell, at every pounding of the palm nuts. And so the shaving of your head and taking your hair and putting it in a very sacred place is to not only signify you being reborn, renewed, but it's also sort of a ritualistic separation of you from your past and from sort of that stored up energy and ashe that resides in your hair. And so you now see sort of these modern initiations being offered where people's head hasn't been shaved, um, but they're wearing all the lekis, all the signs of someone who's sort of been through the process. And then you have to look at people's age. I'm in my mid-50s. Okay, so the time that I would have had a bald head predates some of you all's birth. But when I was given the opportunity to evolve to a higher degree, to actually be a Babalawo, one of the things that I had an issue with was shaving off of my dreadlocks, which were extremely long at that time, but also the idea that I would not be able to work with any other Orisha, that I would not be able to work with any other deity outside of Arula or Orumia. From a voodoo perspective, someone with this much Eve in their blood, that was unacceptable. So I can relate. Um, I still think that initiation is required. And one who tries to avoid or skip initiation is, I hate to use aggressive words, but it's sort of forced through an initiation process by way of life, by way of learning, by way of getting to that level. Andre Pope, Andre Pope, of being an adept. You got to go through something to be a true adept. Even as a child, you got to go through something or have a great degree of skill to be an adept. So we see children now being born, who can play chess, who can do mathematics, who can evolve science to greater levels, who can recite the Bible, chapter and verse from memory. We're talking about genes, we're talking about hormones, we're talking about chemistry, we're talking about the crystal that resides in our consciousness, we're talking about our relationship to science in an organic way that is then fostered and matured by initiation, by study, by instruction. Wapani might tell you that I was playing piano at 3 and 4. Now, Wapani was born 3 years after me. Okay, so she's seen me at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Write songs, write music, hear music, and then duplicate it on the keyboard, on the piano. Manifest a gift, a skill, but still take music, take orchestra, take chorus, learn math, learn how to count, learn how to read the symbols and the signs that are incorporated in the music. So there is yet and still a form of initiation that has to happen, that has to take place in order to be qualified, and to use Andre's word, in order to be an adept. We indeed have to be willing to do a great deal of study and our work. You have children that are born drawing, painting, shaping clay, and crafting things that still require teaching, instruction, discipline. That same brilliant, high IQ child still needs to be controlled around the candy bin. It still needs to be controlled in terms of playtime versus rest versus needing a time to study versus needing a time to, learn other things. That's a form of initiation itself. So my big pet peeve, Andre, with, sort of the self-initiation thing is the assumption in the modern context, in the way the world is sort of shaped right now, that, I'm self-taught, self-made, self-created. It's all about me, but now I can offer a service. Now I can put my hands in your head, put my hands into your body. Even in terms of Reiki, if you understand what Reiki is, people are going into your body and manipulating your energy, consciously being a part of your wiring, and you are inviting them to now be a part of your wiring and to then get entangled in your entanglements. Unless your Reiki practitioner is absolute light, absolute pure, absolutely in the place where they're ready to do that kind of work, not just for themselves, but for other people. It's a lot to ask. Even in my own circle, even in my own life, I'm confronted with the idea that I'm still growing, still confronting many of my own issues, many of the ghosts and shadows of my own past, but having sort of mastered it to some degree to a place where ancestors and spirit has pushed me out into the world in terms of ministry. It's a lot to carry consciously, Kiona. When you are that present, when you know the mistakes you've made, the things you've had to learn, the corners you've had to turn, the detours you've had to make, and then offer service to someone else, offer hope to someone else, offer the ability to change life, to change love and relationships, to change career path or destiny, to change lawsuits and legal issues and judicial issues. Now you're asking a lot of the fortune teller, of the psychic reader, of the healer. And so often when people are in the depth, Andre, it's more than just, becoming an adept in and for themselves, which Ruby sort of suggests. But now they want to step out and be public and be visible. The Christian wears the cross, the Jew might wear the Hanukkah, the Catholic woman might wear a head covering. We have all these outward signs of consciousness, the Eleki, or the other colored beads, because if they're not consecrated, they're not Elekis. They just beads. Um, and so that whole idea is an initiation, becoming an attorney, becoming a doctor, becoming a nurse, and getting acquainted with what might otherwise be dangerous and volatile materials. You would allow a nurse with bad hygiene to draw your blood, especially if it's visible, trash in the room, dirt under her nails. She looked like she just finished fixing the oil pan on her car. You wouldn't let that person inject you or drain or pull your blood. You wouldn't let the phlebotomist near you. I have rejected medical practitioners for the energy. They were too negative, or they were not in touch, or they were not in the moment. You often are sitting there in that room for 20 minutes. I'm paying attention. I'm outside in the hallway. I'm observing and pulling in, the energy and activity. And I've denied, no, y'all better get another nurse. No, y'all better ask somebody else, because me and this person ain't here right now, And so it's in my file. Now, I don't know if they've got me marked as the problem child, but it's in my file because I live more consciously of spirit, not just being spiritual or by spirit practice, but I'm much more conscious of spirit in almost every waking thing that I do. Sometimes it's a handicap. Let me tell you, it's not something you want to pray for, beg for, ask for. It's just not. You want clarity of self, for sure. You want wholeness, healing of self, but you don't want to ask to be a practitioner. You don't. It's 24 hours a day. Some people are upset with me about it right now. It can't be turned off. It can be reorganized. It can be restructured. But the idea of my humanity takes a degree back from spirit and who and what I do spirit, and understanding the amount of time that we have. Because you don't really know the time. You don't know when you're going to be called. You don't know when you're going home. You don't know when you're going to suspend your relationship with this clay body and move on to the next thing. So any waking moment to be present, to be active, to respond to spirit, to do what spirit calls for, not just for the sake of spirit, not just for the sake of pleasing yourself, but for doing things that are going to leave some kind of life-giving, life-changing, beneficial energy to those that come behind you. That's what being spiritual truly is. That's what the vocation of spirit and religion, spirituality and religion, is really supposed to be about. Greetings, each and every one of you who I have not directly respond to. Greetings, Imani Sankofa. Yes, I have too. I've had my mother be in a room and have seen, because many of you know my mother is an evangelical Christian. Now, my mom got third eye sight to some degree, from her perspective. But the ancestors and God has often put us in situations, scenarios where we would be together. Her with her belief system, me with mine, and watched some kind of spirit activity happen right before us. And so I was at a doctor once, and my mama saw it. She saw how they acted, how they responded, their whole disposition changed when they entered the room with me. And we left. You're not about to shoot me up with no Novocaine. No. Let's get some clarity about our energy before you incapacitate me to any degree. So yeah, I've walked out. I fired doctors, medical professionals, not for frivolous reasons, but for energy, for spirit, for attitude towards what we're doing, how we're going to do it, what you're bringing to the table. It said leave the job at work and don't bring your job home. But it's also said, when you're doing your job and you're in your job, that you then leave your personal stuff outside. So sometimes in that process, my very humanity is neglected. People forget that I have to eat, that I have to sleep, that I might have to use the restroom, that I might enjoy a holiday, that I might have Christmas. I did readings all day Christmas Day. I did ritual work all day Christmas Day, and have been doing so ever since. I haven't had a day off. I haven't had a break. And then there's filming, documentaries, commercials, advertisements, music videos, TV shows. Some of you are well aware of that. But that gets lost in the process. You might even consider that any church, any religion who then establishes a building, establishes bills, electric bill, water bill, property tax, mortgages, etc. So there's that line that is hard to narrow down between vocation, religion, spirit, and then living that life in its fullness in the world in which we all live and reside right now, and the responsibilities that are on you wherever you are in the world, wherever you are in the globe right now. With my brother and sister in Spain, is living and experiencing is different than mine. Kenya is different than mine. Nigeria is going to be different than mine. So that idea of Kujichagulia and self-determination. Um, let's make it real simple. It's not easy to be a black man in America. It's not easy to be a black gay man in America. It's not easy to be a black gay man in Nigeria. And imagine being a black gay man in Nigeria standing on a platform of voodoo, standing on a platform that many people make the immediate association with witchcraft, which is seen as a negative thing in African culture. Witchcraft is seen as a negative thing in African culture and in indigenous world culture. It's seen as a show of negative power, a negative use of power, a destructive use of power. So we've sort of popularized that in the West. Black witches and black girl magic and black boy magic and the whole witchy thing. And it's really an aberration to the truth about how these indigenous cultures identify. Imagine being the black woman in America, being a black woman, African woman in the world, in the Western world, standing on a religion that's not Christianity, that's not Catholicism, that's not Scientology, that's not Islam, that's not Judaism, you know, all these empowered structures. And then think about what self-determination means to you. What is self-determination to you? And so even when we're shopping and you choose between, you know, one brand and another, one food type and another, one type of living and way of being over another, we're talking about self-identity. Self-determination is minutes before high 2 o'clock, at the top of the hour of 2 o'clock. I certainly appreciate each and every one of you for being present, for your participation, for your patience with technology, and for typing your questions, comments, and requests in all capital letters. Now, Kiana, what are you saying here, beloved? Initiation is required on path chosen on. No harm in studying all paths. Absolutely, and I agree. That has been a part of my own journey and my own self-initiation. And what makes me unique in the world system today of spiritual practitioners is the time and opportunity that my life afforded me to just read, to just study, to just sit at people's feet, to just travel the country and be a part of ceremony, to be a part of religions, to be a part of services, to be a part of practices, and to have that experience as I then went through my own individual and specific DNA. I mean, initiation. The second comment you have is learning the languages alone and shadow work alone takes time. Activating it. The energy and codings are a process, not an overnight journey. Absolutely, and I've said that every episode of YouTube Live and Blog Talk Radio. Spirits don't tolerate weak people. They will cause trials to strengthen you. Healing from that takes time and experience on your journey. Okay, now you've personalized that a little bit. I have a slightly different take on it. I don't necessarily believe that spirit or spirits target weak people. And you didn't use the word target, but you used the word tolerate, as if our weakness, our insecurity, our lack of knowledge somehow um, irritates spirit. And we do it with Loa, we do it with Orisha, we do it with angels. We give them humanistic feelings. We give them humanistic characteristics. So I don't believe the spirits necessarily feel or care about the things that we feel or care about, and particularly to the same degree of importance. I do think that spirit, and when we say spirits, we're being real general, because spirits, are we talking about Orisha or deities or Loa, or are we talking about angels? Are we talking about the dead? the spirit operated a great realm of bodies, of forms, if you will. So tolerate weakness. Now, some spirits target or latch on to your weakness. So there are those spirits that see your weakness, that know your weakness, and then want to help, and then want to fill in the gap, and then want to push you forward. But then there are those spirits that see the weakness that might show up as our lust, that might show up as our inability to put that chocolate down, and to not have that third and fourth cup of eggnog. Um, we could see that also as a spirit that targets or goes for weakness. My sister Wapani mentioned, speaking of beads, the blue may have been a chosen color because of its vibration. Absolutely. Blue in indigenous culture and tradition has always been venerated as a color that represented not just the sky, but vibrating at a higher level. We also associate blue color with left brain, I'm sorry, with right, yeah, with right brain activity. I mean, with left brain, no, with right brain activity, which is reasoning, mathematical, logical, practical, intuitive to some degree. And then red, left brain activity as active, projective, more psychic, spiritual, not from a mathematical perspective, but from an empathic perspective. And so blue also represented a state of tranquility, a state of God consciousness, you might say. We associated it not only with the sky, but with water, that color blue. Um, let's see. Yes, Imani Sankofa, we must think about serving. And particularly if we are called to serve. Everyone's not called to serve. Everyone's not called to do the same role. Some people are called to build. Some people are called to invest and to handle administrative work and or requirements, while still adhering to and following their own journey. Some people are called to politics, but can still find spirit path and be true to their spirit path within them. I didn't hear any of my Blog Talk Radio cues, so I'm not sure what's going on with Blog Talk Radio. Uh, I should be an archive now, but she should have spoke out loud, and we didn't hear that. So I hope my Blog Talk Radio file, so that you can hear the show in its entirety on Blog Talk Radio in archive, as well as viewing it here in YouTube Live in archive at the end of this broadcast. Kiona, thank you for reminding listeners and participants that if you indeed have personal questions, and I'm not being shady, I don't want to get into, listen, when I read, I go into trance, I go into another place. And I've had people sit here and watch me read, and they don't even understand my process, okay? But I'm hearing your ancestors, I'm hearing the spirits, I'm reading indeed what's on the board. And sometimes it's not what you want to hear, or sometimes it's personal, or sometimes it requires you to go into things that you are not ready to share and or talk about live on air, in archive for people to hear in absentia or to view in absentia. So thank you so much, Kiona. You have to send me an email. You have to visit my website if you want a personal reading. Now, I don't have a problem with people getting a reading, and it's general, and I can answer you, and I can answer other people too. I can answer you in a way that the other listeners and participants can also get the value what's being said and or demonstrated here in the show. I'm grateful for you, Wapani. Love you dearly. That's my sister, y'all. Thank you so much, Kiona, for being a friend and for helping us out in terms of maintaining some kind of visibility and levability and levity in my live chat. I'm grateful for everyone who's participated. Ruby D, you can withdraw that if you want to, or you can leave it, and let's see what happens. But so far, I haven't seen any donations sent through the group show up in my account. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that, unless you indeed choose to uh, withdraw it. Divine, all blessed peace and love, joy and prosperity to each and every one of you. My Blog Talk Radio listeners at blogtalkradio.com/the hyphen divine hyphen prince. The live listening and call in number 845-277-9143. And of course, I will be back here on Monday at YouTube Live, youtube.com/Voodoo Time. V like Victor, OO, D like David, OO, TYE. T like Tom, YE. I'm going to leave you with some new music. I hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation, the rest of your time off, the rest of your holiday, the rest of your family reunion, the rest of your celebration, and just know it's coming. Some of y'all know what that means. I get booked. Hollywood South, just know it's coming. All is a blessing indeed. Thank you. Asheo, Ashe. Thank you so much for participating and for being present. Until next time. Yes, thank you so much, Kiona. I just don't know where it's going, but we'll find out. All is a blessing. Kuji Chagalia, self-determination.